Welcome to another tier maker. It's been about a month since the last one, and we did Keanu Reeves movies. This one, the list is shorter. It's 13. But it is my favorite director of all time, Stanley Kubrick. I saw 2001: A Space Odyssey when I was 9 years old. I'm pretty old, and the Disney Channel was pretty new to cable, and they didn't have a lot of content. So all they did during the days and on the weekends was they ran a lot of old cartoons. They ran a lot of old Mickey Mouse Club, Mouseketeer stuff. And then they showed G-rated movies. 2001: A Space Odyssey is rated G. Something a lot of people don't realize. It's rated G. I saw it on the Disney Channel. We're talking like 1983. 9 years old. 82. And I already love Star Wars. I already love the black hole. It's, Star Wars ripoff basically that Disney did. But and I watched 2001: A Space Odyssey, and I didn't understand a lot of it. I was 9 years old. But it blew my mind. Still. Seeing it and the fast forward between the bone that's being thrown in the air to all of a sudden it's a satellite or whatever, and you're like, what just happened? And the fact that there's no sound in space, right? Every science fiction movie you see as a kid, there's all these cool noises that ships are making in space and lasers firing everywhere, and that's great, that's awesome. But the accuracy, the level of detail in 2001: A Space Odyssey, the fact that they got all these things right, and a lot of it before people walked on the moon. Before people were out in space and could see what Earth looked like from orbit. That hadn't even happened yet by the time they started making this movie. So it still looks great today, and there are astronauts who have been out on the ISS who will say it looks like 2001: A Space Odyssey, a film that came out in 1968 and is still, if you put a gun to my head, I would say it is one of my top 3 films of all time. So instead of going in order, now that I set that up, we're just going to go ahead and throw that up there. It's S tier for me. It's cold. It is a film that is... the computer AI in it is warmer than the humans. That was a decision. That was a conscious decision. There's so many iconic things in this, but the fact that it did really well at the box office, primarily because some film critics liked it and some didn't, but a lot of hippies and people were taking acid and then watching the last 15 minutes. Jupiter and the Infinite, they just sat there and just tripped balls during that slit scan thing where they're going through, they called that slit scan, which is the process they use to make all those lights going past the camera. It's so innovative, and still to this day does not feel that dated. The only dated thing about 2001: A Space Odyssey is Pan Am. There's a few companies, and he tried to predict what the logos would look like in the future. Some of these companies don't exist anymore, and some of the other ones, it looks like retro future. So other than that, so much of this has aged so well, and the overlying concept still blows my mind today. So, Frey, it's not time for bed yet. My dog's giving me a look. What do you mean it still says Star Wars? Won't you refresh? I said just chatting. It didn't save! Thank you. Freya, go lay down. Just give me 2 looks now tonight, like we're going to bed. We'll go outside here as soon as I'm done. She doesn't have to go potty. She's just being lazy and she wants to go to bed. I totally typed just chatting. It's not you. Thank you, Riz. All right. So 2001: A Space Odyssey is my favorite Stanley Kubrick film. I'm just going to spoil it right now. It is S tier. Nothing's going to top it because it opened my mind to so many different things when I was 9 years old. And seeing it today still has a lot of that same power I have a better idea of what the film means, being older now, and having watched it so many times, and having read 2 biographies about Stanley Kubrick, and I own the Taschen, Taschen. There's this huge hardcover book that is like a compendium about Kubrick that came with film cells from one of the personal copies that Stanley Kubrick had in his collection. So I own film cells that were in his private collection at home. His family gave permission for them to cut up a couple of copies that he had like 20 copies. They allowed them to take a couple of the copies and to cut like 4 frames out of each of them and to put them into these books. And I got one. And I should probably pull that out and show it on stream one of these days because it's a prized possession of mine. I think the only films I've seen of his is The Shining, but I've meant to watch 2001: A Space Odyssey. It's a slow film. And by the end, you're either going to be in awe or you're going to think you wasted your time. There's not a lot of in between. You might appreciate the visuals and still hate it. But the fun thing about this movie is he'd commissioned someone to make a soundtrack for the film. And it was taking that person a while. And while he had what they do in movies is they had temp soundtracks that they were putting in. And he had in classical music. The Blue Danube. Something that you hear it now and you think of spaceships docking because of this movie. And he got the soundtrack that he paid for. And the guy got his money. And he tried to put it in the movie. And he's like, I have to stick with this classical stuff. It's burned into my brain now. I have to do it. And it ended up being easily the best decision he could have made. It is so iconic. I don't mind a slow film. I swear someone in this fucking house can't figure out, okay, well, you're going to have to deal with the cheese situation, Robin. We're talking about movies right now. I love The Green Knight. I don't mind a slow, weird film. I appreciated The Green Knight more than I liked it. Love the look of it. Thought the performances were good. By the end, I went, yeah, didn't quite work for me, but I appreciated it, and I think it was really well made. So I'm glad it exists. I just didn't really care for it a whole lot. Yeah, go take your cheese conversation somewhere else. All right, I'm going to try to rip through the rest of this in chronological order. And a couple of these these first couple films I'm going to go really quick on. Fear and Desire it's a D. And Killer's Kiss is like a C-, right? His very first full-length film, he'd made 3 short documentary-type films, like shorts. And they're okay. They're on a DVD that I have that comes with Fear and Desire. And those documentary shorts are on it as well. He was young. He was a photographer. He'd done a bunch of work for Look magazine. Grew up in Brooklyn. And he got the ability to make a film. He didn't really have much of a budget. Fear and Desire is a film that he disowned until the day he died. And then his family finally said, the fans have been trading VHS copies from like the 2 times it played on TV in the 70s and in the 80s. Like they somehow have found a way to copy it, and they've been sharing it all over the internet. And there's bad torrents out there of VHS rips from like the early 80s. Here is a clean copy of the film, even though Stanley himself feels embarrassed by the film. When you watch this, it's not very Stanley Kubrick. And that's the reason I'm ranking Killer's Kiss a little bit higher is some of the camera angles in it and some of the stuff he was doing with soft focus carried over into some of his later films. And the whole chase with the mannequin factory at the end is really cool. So as a movie, there's not much to it. It's actually only like 70 minutes long. Fear and Desire might have a little bit of a better script, but there's not much in Fear and Desire that makes you think Stanley Kubrick. There's a little bit in Killer's Kiss, and I'm going to go ahead and rank it a tiny bit higher. Now, The Killing is the first movie that Stanley Kubrick made that really got him attention, and it still holds up really well. We're going to put it at somewhere in the B's. If you haven't seen this, William Holden leads a group of criminals, and they are going to rob a horse track on the day that is like the busiest betting day of all. And what happens, it's a heist movie, but the ending is incredibly iconic. And anytime you see something on YouTube that's showing, a look back at Stanley Kubrick's films, there's a scene of money blowing around somewhere. It's from this, and it is quite the ending to an otherwise decent film. But the last 10 minutes is the best. He was starting to find his voice here. Then we go to Paths of Glory, and I'll tell you right now, this is S tier for me. It is one of my favorite performances for Kirk Douglas. Even though it's not his most famous, obviously, we'll get to Spartacus. Obviously, Spartacus is next, because he worked with them in 2 films back-to-back. But this is World War I. He is defending 3 people who are accused of deserting in World War I. And they're going to be put to death, and he is trying to defend them. Even though he's not like a lawyer, he's trying to argue to his superior. And it is very... it holds up really well today. The long takes that are walking backwards with the camera as following them or leading them through the trenches and then following them through all these long trenches. When you watch a film like 1917, which is a brilliant film, if you haven't seen 1917, it was nominated for Best Picture a couple years ago. The 4K looks immaculate. It is a fantastic transfer. Really good World War I type movie that all takes place in one take. There's like 2 edits in it that are meant to be obvious, and then there's others where they hide it with CGI. But a lot of the first part of the film and towards the end takes place in trenches, and you're following these 2 leads through trenches. And all you can think, if you've seen Paths of Glory, was one of the first films to really do that, to show what it looked like in the trenches during World War I. But by the end, it's extremely powerful. And there's a scene in a bar that shouldn't work, but it does at the end. And the fun fact, there's a German girl who's singing. And Stanley Kubrick ends up falling in love. They fell in love, and he married her. That was his first wife. So if you see the film, the woman singing at the end in the bar was his first wife. So Paths of Glory is a fantastic film. It's very underrated, and it deserves attention. Spartacus. Spartacus is the most studio film he ever made, and I'm going to put it somewhere in the C's. We'll put it obviously ahead of Killer's Kiss. Spartacus doesn't hold up all that well for me. It's almost 3 hours long. It is a swords and sandals epic. Great cast. Kirk Douglas is fantastic in it. Iconic. You know, I am Spartacus. No, I'm Spartacus. Very famous. That scene, very famous. It takes a while to get to that scene, and there's a lot he wanted to do with this movie that he wasn't able to do because of the Hollywood machine. He had a big budget, but he was basically locked down, and he had to do things the Hollywood way. And he stopped short of disowning the film, but it is one of his least favorite films that he made. In fact, even though it won a bunch of Academy Awards, it won Best Picture. Didn't win in Best Director, but it did win Best Picture. He was so disillusioned with the Hollywood machine that he packed up all his shit and he moved to England. Even though he's from Brooklyn. A lot of people think he was born in England. No, he's from Brooklyn. But he moved to England because he could set up his own type of studio or work with studios there at first, and then kind of built some of his own stuff by the time we get to Full Metal Jacket. Because he could work there, make films, and then send them to Warner, and Warner would release them. Completely free of producers getting in his face. And so, what did he do after Spartacus? He said, I'm going to film an unfilmable novel that is something that shouldn't work. It probably would have gotten me in trouble, and I would never be able to make this movie in America. And that is Lolita. This is a weird movie. I'm going to put it in between these two. And by the way, I like every single one of these movies. None of them are an F to me. And when I'm putting Fear and Desire in as a D, I still like the film. Right? Saying it's a D, this is on the scale of Stanley Kubrick. This is not me personally, like I give that a 4 out of 10 because it's a D. No. These are all like 6 and above on my scale of 1 to 10. Right? Even Fear and Desire, even Killer's Kiss, I still appreciate the films. But I'm just saying, on the Stanley Kubrick scale, that's where these are ranking. that movie completely destroys what the book was about. You're right, Riz. Lolita, the film, does not really tell the story of the book at all, because there was still standards and practices in the 60s, and he was not able to completely do it the way he wanted to. He was able to get away with some things. Watching it now, and then watching Adrian Lyne, Lynne, he made one with, oh God, who was the lead? Oh, and I can see her face. She was only like 14 when they made it. Jeremy Irons was Humbert, and it's creepy. It actually sticks a lot closer to the book, and it's creepy. The way it ends with Peter Sellers and this ping pong match, it's like, what is going on? It's such a weird movie, and it just takes things from the book, and then it doesn't at the same time, because he couldn't do the book the way that he wanted to. Still pissed a lot of people off, the fact that he even made the film in the first place. So, but you're right, Riz. It is not anything really like the book, just bits and pieces. But it sure was a troll movie back then. He trolled a lot of people with that film. Just the fact that he tried to make a movie about it trolled people. Now, Dr. Strangelove. What can I say that hasn't already been said about this film? It's a masterpiece. It is the right length, doesn't overstay its welcome at all. It is... It's based on a dead serious book. I want to say it's called Failsafe. George Clooney made a TV version of it, or he was starred in a TV version of it, and that was a literal adaptation of the book. This, Kubrick started working on the screenplay for this, and I don't think he wrote it by himself. I'll have to double check that. And he stopped and realized, wait a minute, this should be a dark comedy. One of the best decisions he's ever made as a writer was making that book and flipping it into a dark comedy. This, for me, is a high S. It is wickedly funny, even to this day. You can watch this movie and laugh your ass off today. There's conspiracy theories from one of the military guys that's in this that are completely out of left field, and you watch it now and you're like, sounds kind of familiar. You watch the news, that some people actually talk like that. It almost has gained strength over the years. The war room, gentlemen, you can't fight in here. This is the war room. There is a deleted scene that doesn't exist, but there are pictures from it. And if you watch the film, you can even see there's a table in the back that has pies on it. He'd filmed it, and I don't think it exists as a deleted scene. They were going to end the entire war room scene at the end with a pie fight. And then Stanley finally said, that might be a little too on the nose. And he's right. By cutting that out, great decision. It's a little on the nose. The very, very end, there's a speech that's given by Peter Sellers, who plays 3 roles in the movie. Enjoy them. They're completely different. All 3 of them very, very different roles. Peter Sellers, guy was a genius. There's a little speech that he gives at the end after something happens, something major happens. And it's just a little too on the nose for me. Having said that, it is still a masterpiece. Fantastic film. S. Now we're into a little craziness. Now we've got a Clockwork Orange. This is an A for me. I saw this in college, and I think my eyes were like this the whole time. Kind of like Alex. Because nothing was holding them open, but I could not believe what I was watching. And it is this creepy ass 60s version of the future, and nothing looked like this before, and nothing to this day looks like this. It's almost like a lot of vaporwave takes a little bit from 80s, but a little bit of the sensibility of the future, the retro future look of this film too. Sometimes when you look at some of the artwork on some vaporwave type albums and things, and you're like, where is that coming from? Some of the artwork and some of the sculptures and things that are in this movie are so fucking weird. The story itself it's a one of a kind. It's based on a book, and the book is very hard to read. I tried to read it. I couldn't finish it. The dialogue in the movie, it's almost like when you read Shakespeare versus when you watch Shakespeare. Something about the tone in people's voices and the way they're delivering lines, you can understand even if you don't know all the words that are being said. You get the vibe. You can't get that by reading a book. It's like this with this movie too, especially because a lot of the words are either made up or they mean something that most of us, Americans don't understand. After I saw this movie, I had to go and read about it. I had to read what's up with the language, the way they speak. What is up? What was the inspiration behind the story? What happened? Stanley Kubrick took this movie off the market for like 25 years in the UK because it immediately inspired gangs to start walking around dressed like Alex and his droogs, and they were committing crimes. They were beating up homeless people just like they do in the movie. And he said, I'm not going to be a part of this, and he pulled it completely. You could not purchase this on VHS or Blu-ray or anything. DVD didn't even exist at the time when he pulled it. It's never going to show in theaters. He pulled it off the market. He was trying to be responsible, and it took a long time for them to re-release that in theaters in the UK. It was always available over here. I don't think they ever pulled it here. It is a weird movie. It is dark. The ending is fucked up. But again, there's nothing like it. His attention to detail is maybe more in this film than anything he had made up to this point. Well, I can't say that because this film came after 2001. So how do you follow up 2001: A Space Odyssey? You make a Clockwork Orange. Also a futuristic movie, but in a totally fucked up way, in a very different way. It's almost the anti-2001. But his level of attention to detail in 2001: A Space Odyssey was on display even more in A Clockwork Orange. He had a little more artistic license because there's a lot that's not in the book that he had to basically come up with visually. But I'm telling you, this made a star out of Malcolm McDowell, and you would not know who he was without this movie. He is phenomenal in it. Okay, Barry Lyndon. This is a tough one. I'll be honest. I'm gonna probably be in the minority, but to me, this is just above Spartacus. It's a period film. It's almost 3 hours long. It is peculiar. The story, loosely based on a true story, about a guy who didn't have a lot of money and works his way up through whatever, lying, cheating, stealing, backstabbing, etc. And the first time I saw this film, I was pretty bored. Then I watched it again, I want to say like maybe it was a few years later. And I just said, yeah, I'm going to give this another try. And it made a lot more sense to me. I wasn't sitting here trying to pay attention to the story. I was just watching it. And it is a very good movie. And here's the thing. If you want to win some trivia, there's only one movie. There's only one. This is the only movie where Stanley Kubrick has his name on an Oscar. All right? 2001: A Space Odyssey won awards for Best Visual Effects. That was for his visual effects team. Spartacus, Best Picture, nominations for Best Actor, etc. Nothing for Best Director. He did not win for that. But Barry Lyndon, he won an award. He won an Oscar because of the cinematography in this film. And there's something... He started using special lenses because they used all natural lighting. They did not use any artificial light whatsoever. Candlelight, the way they filmed in candlelight, you watch it now, and if you don't know the level of attention that they had to put into filming these scenes with natural light, with no extra light added to it, it was so ahead of its time, and it inspired a lot of filmmakers, a lot of DPs, that the way that they use these lenses. I want to say they even did some things where they invented a lens themselves. I'm going to have to Google that. In fact, I'm going to do that real quick. Barry Lyndon cinematography. John Alcott photographing Barry Lyndon. blah, blah, blah. Blah, blah, blah. This is from 2018. So it took him 4 years to make 2001. Let me do this. Barry Lyndon lenses. There's a website called Shot on What. Barry Lyndon, the full story of the famous f/0.7 lenses. So he shot it in less than one f-stop, which means it's taking in so much light that the lenses have to be a specific type of glass or something. I don't know the technical details. It's not my thing. But the fact that the only Oscar that has his name on it is for Barry Lyndon. You want to win some bar bets? 2001 is rated G. No, people don't know that. Barry Lyndon, only movie that Stanley Kubrick won an Oscar with his name on it. Barry Lyndon. Yeah. It's a good movie. It's a very good movie. It's long and slow and it's period film. But I'm telling you, it is one of the most Stanley Kubrick of all the films. There's so many long, slow zooms in or out on people, long tracking shots through these big-ass mansion hallways, and it's beautiful. It's a beautiful film, even if it's a little unsatisfying in the story. And that's all I'll say. I don't want to spoil it. Okay. The Shining. This one's going to be tough for me to put because this is the second Stanley Kubrick film I saw. I was also 9 years old when I saw this. And I had kind of started reading Stephen King. But The Shining messed me up as a kid. It really messed me up. It did a number on me, but in a good way. I couldn't believe it was so inventive. The Shining, as a film, is still one of the scarier horror films ever made. When you watch it now, it still has an effect because the soundtrack is flawless. Jack Nicholson, his character in it, is extremely unhinged towards the end. If you've read the book, now here's where we want to get into what Koiser mentioned earlier. Stephen King, I like Stephen King as a writer. I've read The Shining. I've read a bunch of his older books. When I was growing up, I read a lot of Stephen King. I'm more of a fan of Stanley Kubrick as a filmmaker, but I'm willing to say when something makes more sense here versus here. Trying to be as unbiased as possible. I think The Shining is one of the few examples where a movie improves upon a book. Because if you've read the book, and you know that Stephen King was a raging alcoholic, the book is so blunt. Now, Stephen King tends to be a little blunt. He's not a subtle writer. And that works to his favor in some stuff. But in The Shining, it's the boiler is this constant reminder. The boiler is at this pressure. Now the boiler is at this pressure. Now the boiler is at... He has all this foreshadowing about the boiler. The boiler is his alcoholism. It's Jack's alcoholism. All right? There. Like, I could have saved you like 40 pages of complete foreshadowing. Stanley Kubrick said, I don't need all that. And I don't even want the alcoholism to be the major factor. There's mention of it. And then towards the end, when the house, the resort is feeding on these people. All right? If you've seen The Shining, and maybe you have your own interpretation, maybe this will have you think of it a little bit differently, or maybe it won't. Maybe you'll agree with me. The house is haunted as fuck, and it is taking like psychic energy from the people that are in it, and the weaknesses of people, it's feeding on these weaknesses, and they have a huge meal with Jack Nicholson's character. His trying not to drink, his failed writing. He basically took up a job as a school teacher. He got kicked out of the school because he did he attack a kid or something? So he lost that job, which is the only reason they're taking this job. And she's going to try to get back to writing. And this is perfect for him. He broke his son's arm. And they talk about that in his interview that he has up at the resort. I'm trying to think of the best way to put this, because I'm going to start droning on and on. I'm a huge fan of The Shining. I think it is still to this day, if someone says, what's your favorite horror movie of all time? I just blurt out The Shining, because it still gets the hairs on my neck to raise up, or the hairs on my arms to go up a little bit, the goosebumps, in a couple of scenes. And to this day, I've probably seen it 30 times. It is S tier, and I have to put it just behind 2001: A Space Odyssey. Now, to what Koister said about Stephen King. Stephen King was not happy about the changes that Stanley Kubrick was making. And his whole thing was, he's not consulting with me. If you read to this day, Stephen King, when he talks about it, he's let it go a little bit, but not too much. He said he never consulted with me. He called me one time, and it was in the middle of the night for me. It was early morning for him. And this is Stephen King saying this. He called me up, and all he said was, "Stephen, are you a Christian?" And Stephen King said, "Yeah, why?" And Stanley said, "I knew it." And he hung up the phone. Now that's Stephen King's story. Stanley Kubrick disavows that, says that never happened. Just a minute, Freya Pop. She wants to go back to bed really bad. Stanley Kubrick disavows that story. He says that never happened. And Stanley Kubrick he never really cared what people thought. So I think if that conversation happened, he probably would have said something. Or maybe it did. And he doesn't remember. Or maybe Stephen King is misremembering something. I don't know. It makes for a fun story. But Stanley Kubrick's whole point was, I don't have to consult with you. I bought the rights to make the film. Your part is done. Now it's my turn to interpret it in a way that I see fit as a filmmaker. So I don't have to consult with you. You've given me the book. If I have a question, I might call you up, but I have my own take on this, and that's what I'm going to show. And he cut out a lot of the obvious stuff that's in the book and made it a little bit more obtuse, but in a way that leaves things to your imagination. Stephen King left almost nothing to your imagination in the book, and that works a little bit more with a book. But visually, as a filmmaker, the less you show, the more you can imply, the better the scares are going to be. Look at Psycho. Look at Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho. He doesn't show Vivien Leigh getting stabbed in the shower. He shows her, in the way he edits it, you think you're seeing her getting mauled, but the way he edits it, you're not seeing everything. And some of that was standards and practices, but who's another director that's done that? Park Chan-wook in Oldboy. The claw hammer pulling the teeth out. You see the claw hammer touch the teeth, and then it cuts to a different angle, and you hear the noise and you pull, but you're not seeing it. But he shows you everything but that and lets your brain fill in the gaps, and your brain's going to make it look worse than he ever could film it. Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Tobe Hooper had no budget. He wanted to show Leatherface putting the girl on the hook and show the hook go through her. He didn't have the budget for it. So they faked it and they hid it in the angles. And yet when you watch the film, you could swear that you've seen the hook go through her. It never does. He didn't have the budget for it, but your brain fills in the gaps the way he edits it. All that to say, visually, you can get away with not being so obvious about some things. I think he did a fantastic job. And I'm not saying The Shining book is bad. It's a great book. But the film version, I think, improves upon it in a couple of ways. Now, one more thing about The Shining, and then I'll shut up. The Shining, Stephen King, I'm mad. He didn't make my version of the book. So he worked with, there was some people who decided they're going to make a miniseries version, like a 4-hour version. And it was on like Sci-Fi Channel or something like that. Spike TV. It was on something, I want to say in the late 90s. And it was it stuck to the book until the very, very ending. I sat there and watched that for 4 fucking hours, and I'm like, what is this bullshit dream sequence at the end? This is not in the fucking book. Like, I got pissed. I'm like, Stephen King, if you're going to sit here and whine anytime you get interviewed about The Shining and your take on The Shining, and it wasn't close, it didn't, and then you change the ending of this, come on, man. So, given a choice between the two, I'm going to side with Stanley Kubrick on The Shining, but it's nothing against Stephen King. I like Stephen King. He's written some fantastic books. Dude, The Stand is a fucking great book. All right, anyway. 2 left. Full Metal Jacket. This is a high B. This is half of a masterpiece. The first half is so incredibly iconic and influential that you have seen versions of this throughout the rest of war films ever since this came out in 1985. Hands down. The second half of the movie is okay. Honestly, it's a little subpar for Stanley Kubrick. But you take the first half of that film, that first 45, 50 minutes, and it is just bone-chilling in how great it is. Fun fact, R. Lee Ermey had never really acted in anything. He was hired as a consultant. They had someone in the film cast as Gunny Sergeant Hartman. Gunnery Sergeant? Gunny Hartman. And Kubrick was like, this isn't working. Talks to the casting director, and he asked about the consultant. And they said, yeah, he served in Marines and blah, blah, blah. And he said, did he try out? I'd like to see him try out for the role. I'd like to see him read for the role. And they said he did read. Like, what? They went back and watched the video. And I wish I could see this. I don't know if it exists. I need to look it up on YouTube. Apparently, it is just mind-blowing that it wasn't really a tryout. It was footage of him berating these extras or these people that were there with him and doing exactly what he does in the movie. And some of the people that were off camera started throwing things at him, trying to distract him. And he could not be distracted, and he was yelling in their faces, and every single insult was different for every single person. And he never blinked the entire time. And Stanley Kubrick watched that and was like, why is he not the guy? Like, he can be the consultant and he can be in the movie. Like, let's do both. So R. Lee Ermey got his start because of this. All right. Half of a great movie. Last, and then we're done, and that is Eyes Wide Shut. This movie is just fantastic. People hate it. Vincent D'Onofrio, amazing. Unrecognizable. He hadn't done a lot before that. He had to put on a lot of weight, and I heard him in a podcast interview, and he when they asked him about it, he's like, I had to put on a bunch of weight. I was gone for almost a year because by this time Stanley Kubrick was taking his sweet time making movies, and he says, and it's still one of the best experiences of my life. That it was painful, it was difficult, it was very mind-numbing at times, and I wouldn't trade it for the world. Yeah, Vincent D'Onofrio. I love Vincent D'Onofrio in this, in Full Metal Jacket, and I love him in Men in Black. That was just on cable a couple nights ago, and I've seen Men in Black like 10 times or whatever. I love that movie. Him being the farmer that's possessed by the cockroach creature or whatever, it's the best. Love it, love it. Vincent D'Onofrio had so much fun making that, you can tell. All right, Eyes Wide Shut is a fantastic film. I've read the book that it's based on. I have a copy of the book and the screenplay together. It's called Traum Novelle. It is about a lot of things under the surface. The color scheme in the film. There are different colors that you see at different times. They are telling you different things. Right down to the different lights that are on the Christmas trees, and the way different angles are showing you see different colors of the lights on the Christmas trees. Some critics saw that and they thought that it was continuity errors. Come on, this is Stanley Kubrick. Do you think there's continuity errors in a late Stanley Kubrick film? Maybe a couple in his earlier films. Do you think there are any in his late films? Why do you think this guy goes over every frame with a fine-tooth comb? He's telling you things. And he's telling a story visually, not just through the words and the performances. What he's showing you on screen, there's so much more subtext. And this film has more of it than I think any of his other films. But by the end, he is just... It is one of the most positive films he's ever made. And it may not feel like it, especially just the way it just ends. But if I told you that Stanley Kubrick died right before this hit theaters, it was done. There was rumors that he hadn't finished the final cut. They were false. He finished the final cut. He turned it in. And not long after, he passed away. I may have seen this in a theater 3 times. Because I felt like this is the last time I'm going to get to see a new release from Stanley Kubrick in a theater ever again. And so, oh, and by the way, I hadn't seen any of his other films in a theater by this time. So I actually got to see one of my favorite, at the time still my favorite director of all time when this came out, to finally see one of his works when it's out in theaters as a brand new film. I kept going to it. I went a third time. And the internet was starting to become a thing. We're talking 99. So I'm reading what people are writing about it, and I'm looking at message boards and people are picking it apart about the colors and stuff. And this is all there for you if you care enough to look. The problem is a lot of people don't care enough to look, and that's fine. It's a movie. Everybody's going to interpret things differently. There's nudity, there's an orgy. Oh my God, we have to use CGI to hide some of the body parts. And all. That was a bunch of bullshit controversy. When you watch the final version, you're like, oh, I kind of see half of a dick. Who cares? If you're an adult and you want to watch that, you want to watch porn, just go watch porn. It's not about that. It's about his character's experience of walking through this place, wishing he could be one of these people and not being one of those people. There is so much in this film if you care enough to watch it and if you care enough to look for it. For me, this is an A, and I will not go any lower than that, and I will not apologize for it. It is a phenomenal film. I can't put it above those other 5. I can't, but it is still a phenomenal film, and to this day, it hasn't aged poorly at all. By the way, some critics were dinging it that it's obviously filmed on sets. Yes, and that's the point. How much of the film is up here and how much of it isn't? I know that's a bit of a cop-out sometimes, but Traumnovelle, dream novel. He slips in and out of daydreams throughout the film. He doesn't tell you this. Stanley Kubrick doesn't tell you this. I'm telling you this. Not all of it's real. It is a wonderful puzzle to take apart and put together if you care. If you look at it at face value, you're probably going to be bored with it. So, I'm an apologist for Eyes Wide Shut. I think it's a fantastic movie, and he went out on a great note. He really did. We never got to see his Napoleon. I have a copy of the script for Napoleon. I printed it at work one day. It's like 250 pages. The cost that it would have taken to make his version of the biography of Napoleon, nobody would have funded it. I don't even think Warner would have funded it. And it was just in this development hell for a long time. And he wasn't ever really happy with the script either. So that's why he never pursued that. But Stanley Kubrick almost made a Napoleon script, a film about Napoleon. Also, one other thing I want to point out about Stanley Kubrick is artificial intelligence, AI, the movie that Steven Spielberg made. The script that Steven Spielberg made is not exactly the same script that Stanley Kubrick was going to make. And you can pretty much guess at what point the script goes from where Kubrick would have cut the film and ended it, roll credits, to when Steven Spielberg was like, well, let's put a Spielberg ending on it. When I watch that film, and he's in the sub, and he's praying to the statue, roll credits. There's your Kubrick film, basically. The casting would have been different. It would have looked different, etc., etc. AI is not a film that's aged. I mean, it's aged okay, but by the ending, and you're like, what? Would have been a horribly unsatisfying ending, but it would have been a very different movie if Stanley Kubrick had made it. And he never really got to collaborate with Steven Spielberg on that film. He never really did. But Spielberg basically had the treatment for it and made his version of it. It was fine. It's an okay movie. I think when you think about Steven Spielberg films, AI is lower half, right? So, also of course, Law and Order, right? Everyone's seen him on Law and Order. D'Onofrio, he's great on that show. And even though he's kind of the same character, the same note that he plays, the way he interviews people, love watching him interview people on that show. Doesn't matter. He's great in it. And what a paycheck. He's probably made so much money off that show. The Cell. Love the look of The Cell. Tarsem is a visual genius. Wow, that script was just not good. There's no script. It's a cocktail napkin script. But that movie still looked awesome. Daredevil, yeah, he's Kingpin in Daredevil, right? I've only watched the first couple of episodes of Daredevil. I didn't get through it all. So, D'Onofrio's been in quite a few things, but he's put a lot of time into that Law and Order, and for good reason. Okay, so this was my tier maker for Stanley Kubrick films. What do you think? What's your favorite Stanley Kubrick film? I think a lot of people are going to probably go with The Shining, and for good reason. It's masterful. Maybe you like the dark comedy of Dr. Strangelove, or maybe you're like me and you think 2001: A Space Odyssey is one of the pinnacles of high concept science fiction. When you talk about high concept science fiction, there's 2001 and then there's everything else. And I think that is not a hot take. That is a pretty well kept opinion. There's plenty of fun sci-fi out there. There's plenty of lowbrow sci-fi, action-based sci-fi. I love a lot of it. Even some of the really bad stuff and the campy stuff. I love it. For me, best science fiction film ever made, it's 2001. So, that's my take. But what's your favorite? Throw it in the comments if you're watching this on YouTube. Thank you for watching. Thanks for watching this far. I hope you've already subscribed to the channel. Maybe throw it a like. That would be great. But any of that, throw a comment down. What's your favorite Stanley Kubrick film? Tell me. I want to know. But other than that, I think that's a good place to stop. Thanks for watching. It's been another tier maker. Another one in the books. I can blab about Stanley Kubrick for hours, and I probably did. In fact, I probably did almost an hour on that. I'm sorry? Not sorry?